Like most people, you walk into the gym beginning of the year, and the place is crowded with everyone who's got a New Year resolution to better themselves, at least physically. So the gym is crowded, and I realized my personal New Year's resolution is to speak more publicly about the things I care about. I'm Ted Coker. I'm an entrepreneur. I tend to call myself a techno-optimist. I am super passionate about this continent. I live in it. I work in it. This channel and this podcast exists to talk about big business, to talk about emerging trends, to talk about disruptive trends. And I don't think we've ever lived in an era that is more consequential, at least not in our lifetimes. I don't think I have. That is more consequential than the one we're living in now, which is the advent of AI and how it's going to affect every single part of our lives. And I also just want to, have a conversation about the impact of AI globally, but also the impact of AI from an African perspective. And to contextualize how I use the word Africa, I'm not necessarily talking about, how we would, lazily use the word Africa as if it's one country. We're a very complex system. We're a very complex continent with very different histories. There are 54 countries, 1 billion people on the continent. And I think in 2050, 1 in 3 individuals is an African, right? So that is a very complex system. And so when I look at Africa, I use a sample size of 10 of our biggest economies, which we'll get to later. The reason I'm talking about AI is I want to shape it from my perspective, which is a techno-optimist, but also what people believe. And a lot of people believe that AI is an existential risk. I think for the first time, that should not be taken lightly. And the reason it's an existential risk is because there are real risks that present themselves. And I think in many circles, they are known as the 5 horsemen of the AI Doomsday. So if you've seen a Terminator movie, you know how that ends, right? So there's Skynet, et cetera, et cetera. But let's start by first defining what those 5 horsemen are. And it's these doomsday scenarios that we face around AI. Okay, so the first one is, will AI literally kill us? And that's a physical threat. The second one is, will AI ruin our societies? The third one is, will AI take all our jobs? The fourth one is, will AI lead to crippling inequality? And the fifth horseman is, will AI lead to bad people doing bad things? That's essentially the long and the short of all the fears that are categorized within AI. I want to talk about number 3, will AI take all our jobs? And the reason for that is because when you're talking about existentialism, you have to talk about what brings us the most meaning. And the thing that brings us the most meaning and defines us is, our work and our job. And so the direct risk is on that. The other reason this is super consequential is because I think for the first time, we are living through this technological evolution that if you define AI, you are looking for the first time at machines that are now able to replicate essentially the human mind. But to be clearer, let me give you the definition. Artificial intelligence refers to computer systems designed to learn from data and make decisions in ways that resemble human thinking. From chatbots to self-driving cars, AI powers the technology that recognizes patterns, solves problems, and even adapts itself over time, particularly that adaptation piece. And so, that's the spring off point, to understand where does the existential crisis come from? Because this thing can do exactly what we can do. Therefore, what is our meaning? I want to classify this as follows. I think there's going to be a ton of interesting stats about the continent and where we are. I want to focus a lot more on what some of the research has already demonstrated. If you started using AI in your own capacity, like I have, and PwC even did this report, where they've already, I think they analyzed 500 million job ads. And with that analysis, you saw about, the results were about 5x productivity gains. You also had, I think 24% of CEOs said that it was a net good for their companies. And, just that most of the stats were pointing towards positive outcomes. But the positive outcome for the company, because it's finding more efficiencies. But what do you as an individual? And again, the categories I'm going to focus on in this episode are AI versus the employed, AI versus the unemployed, and AI versus the unemployable, right? So let's start there. Let's start with AI versus the employed. I'll define someone who's employed as you're holding a steady job or you're running a business, and it's either full-time, it's part-time, or it's contract. You're contributing to an organization or you're running your own business. The categories are going to then be, explored in two ways. One is, what are the potential adverse effects? And then two, how do you stay ahead of the game, right? So, or how do you leverage the opportunity, which is what I think is critical. AI versus the employed. The first adverse effect is the automation of routine tasks. I think everybody has understood that. So repetitive functions like data entry, simple customer service, all of that I think could be taken over by AI. And I think that's a risk to a partial or total job. An increased skill gap is the second one. Workers who don't keep up with evolving tech, I think without a doubt, may become obsolete. And then you either miss the promotions or you get just laid off. There's definitely going to be performance pressure on the employed. AI-driven analytics is a lot deeper than what human analytics has managed to achieve. And that's going to lead to intense productivity monitoring, right? So I think these tools are going to have really strong effects on you. And ultimately that could also lead to high stress and, less autonomy in that way. The other risk for the employed is wage disparity or wage inequality. And where you have highly skilled AI savvy roles, on the one end, you see a lot of wage increases because of those people who master the skills. And then on the other end, you see a lot of stagnation or the diminishing of your roles. And then just generally, what is already happening now is job insecurity and restructuring. A lot of organizations, again, have already found the efficiencies as to how they're going to, leverage AI to create better tools, go into cost-cutting cycles, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's on the adverse effects for the unemployed. I think how you leverage the opportunity is more critical. The first thing is to upskill and reskill. It's critical. You can't get away from it. This thing is a moving train. You're either going to get hit by it or you're going to have to jump onto it. You have to learn new technologies as much as possible. Not that every single person needs to become a technologist, but you're going to have to learn new technologies. Data analytics, AI tools management, the coding basics, just to stay relevant. The second sort of piece to stay ahead of the game is become an AI facilitator in your environment. So position yourself as a bridge between AI systems and then human teams, managing and interpreting the quality. At some point, we're still at a point where humans need to check the AI outputs, right? So when you stand in between, you become a real cog in the system and you're able to bring everyone value. The other thing that AI, I don't think is going to get rid of very quickly is you should focus on human-centric skills, right? Strengthen your capabilities like leadership, emotional intelligence, creative problem solving, and other areas where AI lags. I think particularly the emotional intelligence piece and leadership are going to be critical for your success. Next thing is leverage AI tools as much as possible. I've found that in the simple things that I do, writing decks, writing strategies, sending contracts to clients, etc., I've probably already 10x'd my productivity as far as that goes. So if you use the likes of a ChatGPT and you understand how the different models work, so I move between O1 and O4, and each one has different strengths. But the reasoning capability of AI is quite shocking and scary. But moving away from it is not advisable. And then the other piece around, for the employed is explore entrepreneurship. I would only recommend this if you have a lot of agency in your company or in your business and you're able to really drive people's thinking towards new ideas, new projects, and that, gives you a lot of leverage in this instance. So I'm really keen to get your thoughts and your comments on, how you feel on that. So AI versus the employed. The next category is AI versus the unemployed. And this is, I think, a staggering problem. And I would define unemployed people as individuals who do not have a job, but are actively seeking work or are open to employment. And I think that's critical, especially actively seeking work and open to employment would be considered unemployed. Although you might say, a lot of entrepreneurs are just unemployed. It still applies. Here are the potential adverse effects about AI and the unemployed. The first is competition with AI-driven hiring. And that's where companies automate the resume screening process, and ultimately they overlook the nuanced human qualities that you would only catch when you sit with someone on a one-to-one basis. I think you could probably ask every recruiter and they'll tell you ultimately the person you hire and the person on the resume are not always the same, thing, or you don't always get the same outcome. And I think when that process moves over to AI, that's a big risk. The second is shrinking entry-level roles, right? One of the quickest ways to get rid of unemployment is to sort of have this foot in the door sort of jobs where you get a basic admin entry or basic data entry job, and then you sort of showcase your skills, you meet the right manager, your performance is great, you get someone to sponsor you internally, and that's how ultimately grows individuals within organizations. But if that goes away, that becomes a risk, and that's replaced by AI. The next thing is, and this is a critical thing, because the next thing is a widened skills gap. The longer you stay out of the jobs market or employment or entrepreneurship, the further away you get from the skills that are relevant in that time. And that's a big risk for anyone that's unemployed. So the demand for the tech, the AI literacy is going to rise quickly. And if you're not part of the zeitgeist, you don't understand how far you are. And I think that's a big risk. The fourth is psychological impact. I think longer job hunts and repeated rejections, they tend to erode confidence over time. And that can also lead to discouragement. And then the last piece is informal sector shifts, right? These are, again, the longer you're out of the game, the harder it becomes for you to get back into the game. So where AI gets adopted more aggressively in formal sectors, unemployed individuals may ultimately resort to unstable informal gigs, et cetera. And so I think those are the risks to the unemployed. And one of the ways, or many other ways, to stay in the game or to leverage the opportunity would be, again, to focus on certification programs. There's going to be a lot of things that come out in this AI hype cycle. I think there's no doubt that you are in a hype cycle. You just have to learn enough to know what's real and what's not. But look out for the big organizations that are running and are sort of at the front of this evolution. They're going to create a lot of these programs. I don't think you're going to get a 3-4 year degree on AI because the pace of it is just so fast. So focus on certification projects. The other thing is to target emerging sectors. There are a lot of sectors emerging as a result of AI. It might be helpful to shift your focus there. It introduces new roles. So some of those roles may include prompt engineering, AI training, or digital marketing that may require advanced steps and skill sets. And in that itself, I think there's a critical entrepreneurial opportunity as far as, educating young people coming into the workforce on where to direct themselves, as far as, which way should we go as far as skills acquisition is concerned. That's what drives growth and execution. The amount of skills you're going to acquire along the way is what's going to be critical to your success. The next thing is entrepreneurship. I don't know if this can be taught. I think that if you have it in you and you're able to identify opportunities within this, it's a great way to move away from this holistic risk that is unemployment by leveraging, a lot of freelance platforms, create services that complement AI, so human oversight, specialized consulting, et cetera, et cetera. The next way to sort of take advantage of this is to network in tech communities. I know that on the continent, it's not easily accessible to everyone, but there are a lot of online platforms. I'm going to share this deck, which is, I'm going to include all the resources. You get to see all the slides. Teddy's going to put up some of these slides as I'm speaking, so you'll get a firm understanding of all these things. And then the next thing is to leverage any and all sort of governmental and NGO initiatives that could get you closer. So I think that's critical. And, that sort of wraps up the whole thing around, AI versus the unemployed. Now, the next one is a very tricky category. And this is where you have AI versus the unemployable. Okay. And I think there are a few nuanced pieces, but I want to define it carefully. And I want to remain at the point where I'm speaking to able-bodied, able-minded individuals who, for various reasons, lack of skills. You have a lack of skills, you have a lack of education or access to the same. You struggle significantly to find or hold any form of steady employment, some of which might be because of your own vices, or you just don't have enough skills. And then, this happens to you regardless of the economic conditions. And generally, it may also extend to people who have low literacy levels, and then minimal digital skills, poor health, legal barriers, and then other systemic obstacles preventing them from participating in the labor force. And I think those are some of the more structural challenges that these people have. Okay, so let's look at the potential adverse effects for the unemployable as far as AI is concerned. I think the first is a deepening digital divide. So the lack of basic literacy or internet access, I think further excludes them from AI-driven job markets. By the way, the longer we go on with this, the harder it becomes to chew. The second is loss of low-skill work. So manual or basic service roles could be automated, removing a sort of last resort, from this whole minimum education piece, which is a hard thing because it's generally a way in. People start with manual, sort of what you might call piece jobs, and then elevate themselves from there. The third is systemic barriers, a real challenge for most people. I think that without targeted interventions, this group may remain permanently marginalized in an AI-dominated economy. And I think that we on this continent are super, super vulnerable to that. The third is what we might call, the fourth, negative stereotyping. I think when AI-based hiring screening becomes super widespread, I think that can be problematic. Backgrounds, lack of experience, that sort of stuff is quite tricky when you don't have a human to intervene and decide, okay, we're going to give this person a chance. And then the last is mental health struggles. I think, again, prolonged unemployment and the lack of hope can lead to a lot of stress, can lead to depression or other issues, and that just reinforces the cycle. How do you stay in the game if you're unemployable? That's a tough one. And to a degree, I think we should panic. If you realize that you are unemployable through a fault of your own, i.e. you can't hold a job, you're not getting skilled, a small degree of panic, I think, is essential. But here's how I think you should stay ahead of the game. Basic digital literacy initiatives, you need to find those and connect to them. It's harder for those who are not connected, who don't have access to mobile phone, internet access, et cetera. I personally believe that internet access needs to become a fundamental human right in the era that we live in. And I think that once you have a cell phone and an internet connection, you can be anything in this world. The second is vocational training partnerships. You often see opportunities around tailored programs, where you sort of get access to AI, what we call AI adjacent roles. And I think that could also be quite strong. Subsidized apprenticeships are also critical, similar to what I think government is able to achieve for unemployable individuals. And then, something that's mainly out of their hands is this whole supportive policies that speak to social services and the ability to get people into, participating in the economy. And I think that's going to be tough. The next thing is community entrepreneurship. The unemployable, generally, if you get to a point where you've created some skill sets for yourself, can, get together and work towards, creating opportunities within your own communities. That's never easy, but it's one of the ways I think you could leverage such opportunities. And that brings that segment of this episode to a close. How AI affects the employed, the unemployed, and the unemployable. I think if I look at the key takeouts from this, for the employed, it's individuals, you gotta stay proactive. You have to stay proactive, and you have to proactively evolve to remain relevant in the market. For the unemployed individuals, I think you need to seek out the newly emerging opportunities, and you need to take innovative approaches to win. For the unemployable, I think it requires significant support structures in order for you to break into a tech-driven world. I'll do this in the next episode. I'd be keen to see how much of the gig economy is critical to getting people into the tech economy. Drop all your comments and your thoughts about that segment. And I said it in the beginning, I said the longer we chew on this, the better. The next category I want to talk about is, I think that was a holistic view, employed, unemployed, unemployable. But let's get to some specifics. And some of those specifics, I want to chat about job categories. And that speaks directly to what a lot of people do. So let's kick this off with routine and repetitive tasks. Okay, example of these jobs are data entry, factory, assembly line workers, or simple bookkeeping or clerical roles. And the way I want to frame this is, let me actually contextualize this better. When I'm going to look at AI versus job categories, I want to look at the examples of the jobs. I want to look at the time horizons for its being affected. So the first time horizon, and by the way, this is just reading, research, and sharing. I don't think it's deterministic. We actually don't know what will happen. It helps to have an idea though, right? So the first would be a 3 to 5 year outlook, and then the second would be sort of 10 to 15 years. Again, none of which is deterministic, but it's essential to possibly understand, right? So factory worker, assembly line worker, bookkeeping, clerical tasks, in the next 3 to 5 years, automation gains traction. I think that's unmistakably something that happens. So where you have robotic process automation, and then the basic AI softwares continue to replace low-level data handling or manual tasks in manufacturing and offices. The next thing is partial workforce reduction. That is already happening. There are thousands and thousands of jobs that are being cut. And that's a reality. It's happening right now. Employers may downsize staff performing purely repetitive functions. And that essentially, there's two narratives. The company would say we've found efficiencies. And so we are freeing resources for more complex tasks. But it's not everyone that has the skill set or the ability to handle those complex tasks. And so in a 3 to 5 year window, that's what happens. 10 to 15 years, further consolidation, I think, again, mostly purely repetitive and repeatable and predictable tasks are fully automated. The next thing is human oversight only. You might get to a point where there's minimal human involvement for quality control, troubleshooting, or task requiring sort of nuance or subjectivity, right? So where human judgment is critical to the success of that piece, right? So that's what I'm calling routine and repetitive tasks. The next category is customer support and administrative services. So you work in a call center, you're a call center representative, you're a receptionist, office support staff, basic HR processes, so you process benefits and all sorts of things. In the next sort of 3 to 5 years, chatbots and AI assistants, that's already happening. You're going to get people used to the fact that I'm now talking to an AI that happens to be useful. And as a measure of last resort, you are then going to say, I want to talk to a human being because I need one neck to choke, as it were. But the widespread adoption of, in call centers and customer support is going to move purely to chatbots. You're also going to have hybrid teams who handle more complex queries or sensitive situations. Again, I don't think we do away with human judgment very quickly. And so those two things are critical to what happens in 3 to 5 years. And then 10 to 15 years, advanced conversational AI, voice assistants become nearly indistinguishable from humans from a tier 1 support point of view. And then the next thing is just human intervention for what we call edge cases, where humans focus on the AI couldn't solve it, so it's been escalated so that we can get an outcome that works for both the customer and the business. So those are complex or emotional situations. I think if you're a hostage negotiator, you're right. Your job's not going anywhere. And then strategic aspects like customer relationship management, perhaps business development, that's not going away anytime soon. Let's talk transport and logistics. Examples are truck drivers, delivery drivers, warehouse sorters and packers, supply chain coordinators. In the next 3 years, you get what's being called incremental automation. So AI-based route planning, partial warehouse automation. So there's robots, there's picking, there's sorting. This has already happened. The robots are already here. The robots have already taken over. They just don't look like the robots we think about yet, i.e. the humanoids, etc. But if you have these massive data centers, that's all robots. I think there are already these Amazon factories that are completely executed as far as the line work or the factory work is concerned. It's just pure robotics at this point. So this is already happening. So in the next 3 to 5 years, you're also going to get pilot programs for autonomous vehicles. I think San Francisco is already running Waymo self-driving cars and tests. And, hopefully you don't get another, false alarm as far as startups. There's a trucking startup that I'm forgetting now that wasn't genuine. He created a truck. They pushed it down a hill and said that it's autonomous. Not that, but you're going to find real self-driving trucks. And I think the thing that's really going to change the game is delivery drones. Delivery drones are going to be a game changer. But these are not mainstream yet. We have a lot of restrictions around where drones can go, etc. Over the next 10 to 15 years for transport and logistics, widespread driverless technology, I think that gets adopted. Autonomous trucks, ride-sharing services, drone deliveries, I think may, significantly reduce the risk or the need for human drivers. Specialized oversight roles, where humans oversee fleets and autonomous vehicles. They handle exceptions and manage logistical coordination. And so the underlying thing is that for the human who gets to that point where they get to exercise the judgment, it's going to be about experience. It's going to be about, time put in, and again, being a bridge between the human experience and the AI experience as well. So that's transport and logistics. When you talk about highly specialized roles, one of the things that I personally didn't foresee happen was that knowledge work was going to have the closest impact as far as AI is concerned. And I mean, you would have thought that knowledge work only comes much later. But because these AI systems can reason faster than us without complaining. And so if you come to me and say, I need a report on X, I'll do the report. But you come back and say, I need you to change X, Y, Z, I'll make the changes. I need you to change X, Y, Z. Okay, I'll make the change. I need you to make this change again. Okay. I need you to make this change again. And eventually a middle finger might come out. And that's where the tension between iteration comes in. The machine never gets tired. As long as you have credits on some of these platforms, it will continue to work time and time and time again without complaining, and just by getting better at the execution that it's providing. That is a real threat to everyone in the knowledge space. Let's talk about these examples. So software engineers, senior software engineers, data scientists, machine learning engineers, creative directors, brand strategists. I said earlier that I think between GPT 01, you can get a full deck within 8 seconds based on how good your prompt is. And because it's such a strong reasoning algorithm, it continues to add to it. And that's a real threat to anyone who doesn't master how to do that, right? So our output becomes how good are you at prompting, the AI platform or the chatbot or whatever. So that's a critical piece. Surgeons, specialized doctors, architects, in the next 3 to 5 years, the horizon is AI augmentation. So I think there will be tools to help specialists streamline creative technical processes. You can now generate code snippets already. If you quote the Mark Zuckerberg and Joe Rogan conversation, he's already talking about the fact that by the end of 2025, they would be able to create a language model that is the equivalent of a sort of, mid-level programmer. That's staggering. That's somewhat frightening. There's going to be a high demand for AI expertise. So skills around AI and machine learning professionals, I think, are going to remain short in supply. And so that curve, I think, is going to increase, and a great way for people to go there. And I think salaries are going to remain competitive. And then creative collaboration. Artists, writers, content creators, we're already doing it now. Generative AI started with the creator economy, and it's going to cut through the rest. So, And then 10 to 15 years, sort of advanced co-creation. AI systems, they handle large portions of the research, the modeling, the creative ideation, leaving us to sort of refine and, rework the vision, which is, again, the human judgment piece. You also then have ethical and regulatory leadership. Experts are going to be forced to navigate the ethical, the legal, and societal implications of powerful AI tools, especially in sensitive categories like medicine, agriculture, policy, et cetera, war, you name it. And then in 10 to 15 years, there's just continuous upskilling that's required. Even highly skilled roles are going to keep evolving in order to manage advanced AI capabilities, I think you have to balance machine-driven outputs with human judgment even more. And that's where we're going to be. Next category is musicians and artists. All right. I think that there are so many job categories. I've selected the ones that I think are quite consequential in my thinking, but there's a lot more. And the more you think about, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'm happy to jam on those. Music and artists. Over the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to get AI-assisted creation. You already have music creators, you have art creators, you name it. It's the one use case I think that's been successful, even though it may not be monetarily successful yet, but it's a use case that's been adopted quite rapidly. The likes of DALL-E, Midjourney, Grok is really great, GPT, Google, like all these tools are absolutely incredible. Increased productivity. I think this is, when I talk about the net gain, as far as AI is concerned, I think the increased productivity is critical. Musicians and visual artists can produce more content much faster, experimenting with styles or inspiration, and then AI suggestions. The other thing it's going to do is completely lower the cost barrier of creating, right? So I think that with the likes of Sora and Veo from Google, at some point, if you're talented enough, you'd be able to create, your own movies, music videos, et cetera, as it evolves. I don't think it's ready for prime time yet, but it's going to evolve and eventually get there. Over 10 to 15 years, again, proliferation of AI-generated art. You could produce high-quality music, visuals, and even 3D experiences with minimal human input. I think that's critical. The next thing that I think happens is human touch would still be in demand. I saw a really cool video of Ben Affleck. I think it was at the Deal Book conference, where he was talking about the fact that large language models still input execution, but they do not have the taste. And what movie makers often talk about is, the production is enjoyed based on the human taste. And ultimately, again, it goes back to human judgment and what we think will remain. Again, time will tell, because if your AI can write the script, can be the voice, can generate the content, it's going to be a matter of time before we can discern what's a human-created masterpiece and what's not. So that's an incredible piece. And then the evolving legal landscape, I think, is critical. Copyrights and ownership laws around AI-generated, that's going to reshape how creators earn royalties and claim, authorship of their own creations. I think that's going to be a game changer, because you might create something once, it exists in a marketplace, and everyone would, sort of license it from you. And I think there's a lot of training data that also needs conversations around that. And then sports players. Ça veut dire quoi? What is it?
40 minutes.
40 minutes. Hey, we're running. I'm almost done. Sports players, I think between the next 3 to 5 years, data-driven training, wearable tech, that's already happening. AI performance analytics, smart coaching tools, those will help athletes. I'm excited to see, how that's going to play out. Training regimes, reducing injury, etc. Programmatically reduce injury. And then scouting and recruiting. Teams use AI to identify players' potential, track performance metrics, and stimulate matchups. I always wonder how the sports betting platforms are going to deal with AI and how predictive models are going to work. And then in the next sort of 10 to 15 years, personalized AI coaching, sports and VR integration, I think is going to be a big thing. And then limited replacement risk is another thing where what we're talking about there is that while AI can't replace the human competition and the fandom of the game, it can change how sports is experienced, right? So you could now move to AI referees, advanced tracking, and then, strategic decision aids. 2 more categories. Construction gets to a point where you've got AI for planning and safety. Algorithms will assist with project scheduling, cost estimation, and hazard detection. I think that's done now through drones and computer vision. You're going to have semi-autonomous machinery. Get yourself a 3D printer. You're going to need one. So 3D printing of building components, robot-assisted bricklaying, or excavation may start reducing the need for certain manual tasks. In the next 10 to 15 years, increased automation of routine tasks. Again, the robots start handling the repetitive labor-intensive jobs, bricklaying, concrete pouring, and then just improving efficiency and effectiveness. And then AI-optimized building design. These tools just generate plans. I thought of something, and I thought of saying it or not, but some people close to us were affected by the LA fires. And I think that in future, you're going to have these systems that can recommend against some of these risks that happen in our societies. And then a shift to supervisory roles. Skilled human workers focus on overseeing the robots, handling complex installations, and then managing unexpected on-site challenges. Police officers, 3 to 5 years, AI-assisted surveillance and predictive policing. So you're going to use facial recognition, data analysis, pattern detection, and then identify high-risk areas or suspects through just pure data. That's frightening. That's shocking. But it's a thing that's coming, right? There's definitely going to be some privacy concerns with that. How much of my information is out there? How much of my information would a police officer have access to? And how would they use that information to make decisions in those instances? Body camera analytics. AI can automatically flag certain behaviors or incidents for review, improving accountability. It's a bit touch and go because you're still going to have the human element there. And then in 10 to 15 years, intelligent monitoring systems, advanced AI, could monitor public spaces in real time. I think it already happens in China, unless I'm mistaken. Identifying anomalies. But in high crime areas, I think this is required. And it's absolutely critical. And then less routine patrols, so more complex responses. Simple patrols are not necessarily, monitoring bits of information. They're looking at something a lot more holistic, and they can do, a lot of pattern recognition and become preventative. And I think that would be a great outcome. The greatest outcome with crime is to prevent it. And I think that's critical. But one of the biggest challenges you're going to find in the next 10 to 15 years is, I think, the ethical and the bias challenge. We experience that now, but I think it's going to be augmented, and we need the right regulatory frameworks to be put in place in order to avoid misuse. I live by this this ethos that is winners win, and I think that how do you win in this economy is you have to become anti-fragile. You become anti-fragile by making sure you stay ahead of the curve. And the duration of this video has to be reduced because of the number of, or the amount of information that is out there. And it was really hard. It was really hard for me to find, workspaces or careers that are unaffected by AI. You literally have to go in. If you want to play around an area that is not affected by AI, you have to go in. You have to find the plug, and then you need to disconnect it. Like,